Good afternoon. And if you are in T115, OMB Treasury, and the PRAC United Against Improper Payments, then you are in the right place. I am honored to be with three distinguished panelists today. And so I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I'll introduce them, and then we'll get started. So I'm Ann Eberts, I'm AJ's CEO, and as you all know, AJ is all about accountability and transparency. So I am just thrilled to be with these three professionals and senior leaders this afternoon. I'm going to introduce them first, and then we'll have some polling questions, and then we'll get on with a discussion. So Deirdre, hey Deirdre.
Hi,
Harrison is the Deputy Controller of OMB, and as a senior member of the OMB management team, she supports the President's management agenda and other administration priorities. She's also responsible for overseeing OFFM, or the Office of Federal Financial Management, which has a very diverse portfolio, including issuing government-wide policies, circulars, bulletins, memos, the uniform guidance, which many of you are familiar with, and other issuances. So she's worked in government for quite some time and also had some time in the private sector. Next up is Bob Westbrooks. Bob, hey.
Hey, everybody. Good to be with you.
So Bob was appointed as the Executive Director of the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, or the PRAC, the end of April in 2020. He's been in public service for 26 years, focusing on accountability and anti-fraud activities, and serving as the Inspector General and in the Inspector General's office for several agencies at Pension Benefit Guarantees, Small Business Administration, Department of Transportation, National Archives, and the Postal Service. So Bob, you have a wealth of experience in the IG community. He was also served as the Professional Development Committee Chair in the Council of Inspector General for Integrity and Efficiency, or CIGE. And last but not least is Tim Gribben.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Tim was appointed Commissioner of the Department of Treasury's Bureau of Fiscal Service on May 13th, 2019, and he provides leadership, policy direction, guidance for fiscal services efforts to transform financial management, delivery of shared service in the federal government, and oversees bureau operations, including payments, collections, security auctions, accounting for the nation's debt, and producing the financial report of the federal government. He previously served as the CFO and administrator for performance at the Small Business Administration, and he too has spent some time in the private sector. So we have a well-qualified, seasoned group of folks to talk with today. So let me tell you why I wanted to bring these folks together. And earlier this summer, I was reading through, I'm kind of a geek, and I'll get on to the alerts coming from the CFO Council and CIGE, and I saw these joint alerts that came out, and I'd never seen a joint alert. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I just had never seen a joint alert from OMB and the PRAC. And I thought, this is awesome. It's great that we see, organizations working together to do, to be accountable, transparent to the public, and to point out things that, we need to know about and what the priorities are, and, things to pay attention to. So I was super excited to have that. To read those, and that's why I said, hey, I want to pull these folks together and talk about how did you start doing joint alerts, and what are your focus areas, and we had a discussion about really focusing on improper payments, and certainly with all the pandemic response funding that's out in the system, $5 trillion. I mean, that's a huge amount of money, and we know that there's fraud. We know that there are improper payments, and I remember talking to Michael Horowitz probably about a year ago, and he said, Ann, if there's just even 0.5% with all the money out in the system and pandemic response, if there's only 0.5% of fraud, that would fund the entire Department of Justice for an entire year. So when you start thinking about really the amount of money that's out there, I mean, it's just kind of incredible and a little bit mind-boggling. So we have this group here together to talk about again, payment integrity and how to make payments right and reduce the amount of fraud out in the system. But first of all, I want to learn a little bit about you all that are attending this session. So I have a couple of questions, actually 3 polling questions. So if you can get into your social Q&A on your app or on your screen. So did your agency distribute COVID relief funding to state or local government entities, tribal or educational entities? So I want to understand, again, who you all are. So it's just an easy yes, no question and answer. Okay, so about 40% yes. $45, wow, it's almost 50-50. That's kind of amazing. Okay. Okay, we about ready to close that poll? Okay, so we have lots of representatives from folks that distributed funds. Okay, question 2, has your agency received COVID-19 relief funding from the federal government? So I know we have state, local, and educational entities out there, attendees. Wow. Okay, we're settling down. No, not yet. Okay, I'll say about 58% yes. Okay, why don't we go ahead and close that one? And then we'll go to the last question. Is your agency or organization responsible for reporting on the use of COVID-19 relief funding? Again, just yes or no. Okay, it looks like we have about 70% yes. Okay, so this is our audience, guys. Okay, thank you. And close that poll. And I will tell you all now that we will be taking questions and answers, so definitely put your questions in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring those, and as we go through a discussion, if there are specific relatable questions, I'll make sure that I field those with the group here. So let's start out talking about oversight and accountability. And who would like to go first? Deidre? Kind of kick off our discussion about, what you all want to focus on and the messages you want to share with our group.
Sounds good. I thought I would start by answering your question about how those joint alerts came about.
Oh, good. Yes, thank you.
I am proud to say it's one of the first things that the PRAC and OMB worked on as I took over the role of Deputy Controller in January of this year. So when the Biden administration arrived, they made it really clear that payment integrity was going to be a top priority for this administration. While we are still in a pandemic, and we were then, they knew that we were about to pass additional legislation that was going to have more money. You referenced that, Ann. There was already lots and lots of money going out the door, but they wanted to make sure that moving forward, we were going to get the balance right between not just getting the money out the door quickly, but also making sure we were balancing that with payment integrity and making sure we were putting controls in place. So one of my first days on the job, I got to interact with Bob and his team over at the PRAC and just kind of say hello and introduce myself and try and come up with ways that we could work together as we were thinking about some of the lessons that we might have been learning together from the CARES Act and some of the money that had gone out in the beginning of the pandemic. So that way we weren't going to make the same mistakes with future legislation. And so with that, the idea of coming up with a joint alert on payment integrity risks and some of the lessons learned from the CARES Act came to be, and our teams got together. The PRAC helped us get together a group of agency IGs to talk about the things that they were seeing, along with my team on the payment integrity side of the house, to just talk through issues and identify some of the risk factors as well as mitigation strategies. And so that was the birth of the joint alerts. Bob, do you want to jump in and from your side of the house, what that looks like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly right. And I'll give credit where credit's due. I mean, Deidre called right away when she got this new position, and it was for this joint alert and other activities like that. It's, in some respects, I look at it, it's less about the substance of the document. It's the symbolism of the document that I think is critically important. As anybody that's been around government knows, the clearance process is incredibly difficult from both OMB and a collection of a gang of 22 IGs. So you can imagine the meat grinder that this document had to go through on both sides to get produced. But it was important for us to do that. It was important for us to, this is one of those rare occasions that maybe isn't so rare anymore, where there's common ground between OMB's interests in payment integrity and the IG community's interests in payment integrity. We have different perspectives, different lenses, but we have a common goal here of reducing, payments to dead people and payments to multi-dippers and errors in payments. So, we're trying to say, okay, how can we demonstrate that voice that we're in unison in certain areas, and these products came out of it. And so we did one in April, and then we followed it up with a second one in July. And the second one in July is something I think we all have an interest in, including Treasury, which is really, this is an opportunity for the federal government to really make significant advancements in the area of data analytics and robotic process automation and the like. I mean, this is just if we can't do it now as a government, when will we ever be able to do that? So that's why we have a strong interest in doing these types of documents. And there's so much more I think we'll talk about later, how the PRAC is working with OMB and the ARP team to really find the common ground and to identify issues and to tackle problems collectively. So that's my perspective on those alerts.
So Tim, do you want to weigh in on, I mean, I know it's a joint thing between PRAC and OMB, but certainly from a data perspective, Treasury, is the home to an incredible amount of data, as well as facilitating some of the data sharing with other agencies and hoping to make sure that we don't pay dead people, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, though, I would take a step back and say, as part of Treasury's role in also having some programs, when you talk about oversight and accountability, there's nothing that gets to the basics to say that you've actually set up your organization in the right way to do that, that you're making programmatic decisions that then are easier to then check. Are the funds going to the right recipients and for the right reasons? And that's a lesson that Treasury learned from CARES versus the recovery program. Is we didn't. We tried to implement CARES by creating a bifurcated organization that reported to multiple people, and there was a disconnect between policy and back office operations. So we brought that together so that we knew and used some of the guidance to say, what are the things that we should be looking for? Now, fast forward to the role in Treasury and in the federal government that the fiscal service plays is we do have a lot of data, and we looked at how can we add more data sources, the more data sources that we can provide as part of our data analytics solutions, do not pay, payment integrity, that would help other agencies. And as we get more into the conversation, I can share some of that, the lessons we learned, how we were able to leverage data to be able to make payments more effectively and drive costs out of the system and have more confidence that the payment was going to the right individual. And then some tools we were able to put into place to help the IG community better target their resources to uncover some instances of fraud and how to find that. So Treasury takes this role very seriously, and we work closely with OMB on how we improve the universe of data sources that are available and how we make that available to other agencies and get the message out, because I think there's still a lot of agencies that have no idea that these are free resources that we provide because they return such a big dividend on the other side.
So how do you communicate that better, or how do you get other agencies to understand that, Tim?
Well,
Is that the age-old question too?
That is the age-old question. So, and Deidre wants to say something, but I'll say is we try to do it in multiple avenues. So we have our own agency outreach team that communicates the message about the tools and services that we offer. We also use AGA and events like this to get the message out, and we also rely on OMB to as part of the outreach that they do to agencies to make sure that they are aware of the services that are available and some of the best practices that they should be incorporating. One of the big messages that I'm trying to convey is when I was at SBA and Treasury was talking to me about do not pay, I was looking at it from my CFO perspective of before I certify that payment file to send to Treasury for payment, that I'm looking for dead people. So it was a focus on not paying dead people, but it's actually a lot more than that. And the message is there's a lot that we could all be doing in agencies to stop an obligation before it happens, much less before the payment file is produced. And we've been piloting ways of doing this. So piloting how we can do account validation, and we can also do death validation.
You're absolutely right. We rely on Treasury every day to help spread the news about the work that they are doing. And then every once in a while, we at OMB get an opportunity to raise that up. And the passing of the American Rescue Plan was one of those opportunities. And so within a week of signing the bill, we issued a memo, M2120. And in that memo, we outlined a new process that brought together the PRAC, ONB, and what is now the White House ARP team, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it also really brought program integrity and payment integrity to the top of everyone's mind. And so as part of that memo, we required all new programs as part of the American Rescue Plan to issue a plan to us at ONB about how they were going to do that balancing between getting the money out the door quickly and making sure they were paying the right beneficiaries, as well as also thinking upfront about the transparency and reporting on the back end. So agencies came to us, and I can assure you, we talked about do not pay all of the time and making sure that that was part of their process before they were up and running. We also, as part of that process, is where the PRAC, ONB, and the White House ARP team really came together and started doing what we ended up calling these gold standard meetings, where we took the plan that agencies had sent to ONB and had worked through, and then had the agencies present to their IG, the PRAC, ONB, and talk to us about what these new programs entailed and how they were going to get that balance right. And so those meetings have really become so important to us at OMB, as well as the White House team. And PRAC, I'll let you speak, Bob, I'll let you speak to the PRAC, but it's just been a game changer in terms of getting us all in the room and talking about payment integrity, to the point where I think at one of our last sessions, one of the IGs may have said, bringing payment integrity back, almost like bringing sexy back to the conversation, because it had been so refreshing that payment integrity was such top of mind for some really senior level folks.
That's great.
Yeah, and just a couple of points I would add to that. One is kind of building on what Tim was saying. We've seen IG reports that are issued, and it's one of those things that's very frustrating. I think we all share the frustration, all three of us, where there are existing, valid, effective controls at the federal level that agencies chose not to use or deploy. And for the period of time that they saved in mission delivery, and you're looking back with the benefit of time, you're saying, those tools are there for a reason. You have to use those tools. And one of the main tools that an IG has or leverage to persuade agencies, of course, is audit reports and recommendations, and highlighting when there's those complete failures of using those tools. And so we are on the lookout for that, and there's been published reports on that. On Deidre's point on those gold standard meetings, they've been just incredibly impactful and a game changer. And I have to give credit to our chair, Michael Horowitz, for setting the tone among the IG community. These are not easy for us. be easy to say, hey, come to a briefing. We're gonna present to you implementation program level data, and we know that you can't give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, but we just want you to listen to it and raise any and tell us if there are any fatal flaws. That puts auditors in a very, very difficult place. But Chair Horowitz and the IGs have found that narrow area where they can occupy, and we can listen to these programmatic briefings. And we listen to it from really two perspectives. One is transparency, which helps ensure accountability. So we look for those, where are there opportunities where we can increase transparency on the spending data, and then the program integrity. They're inseparable. And on the program integrity, we've had side jobs come out of that where we say, we want to do a little bit of follow up, and we're going to examine and kick the tires on some of these fraud controls being used and relied upon for these new programs to see if they are, if we have reasonable assurance that they are effective. And it's a very exciting, non-traditional audit work that, and that's what the PRAC is bringing to the table in those meetings. And then, of course, the program level expertise of our IGs is off the charts. So I think it's good government. It's an example of good government, quite frankly.
When you were talking earlier about not leveraging controls, were they turning off controls that were like system controls, or these are just procedures that were not followed? It's
the basics, right? It's the do not pay. It's, death master file kind of stuff. Certain controls that are easy with, suspicious IP numbers is a classic one. If you've got an agency that has, a public facing intake process, that stuff's easy to gather, and then, there are controls there. The big one is do not pay, and that's what we found. And then SBA also found, which is infuriating to a lot of people, is vendors or contractors that have been suspended and debarred. That data is there. The data is in the system. We should be checking that system to find out if these folks should be getting more government money or not. That's a very basic tool, and that was bypassed in cases as well.
We also saw a lot of opportunities during the CARES Act where the legislation either didn't require or actually allowed agencies to ignore some of these checks, right? So with the American Rescue Plan, we told agencies to really go above and beyond and to really think through how to reinsert these checks and balances. And kind of like Tim was talking about some of the lessons learned at Treasury, to really take a step back and think about the right way to think about getting this money out the door, not just the way to get it out the door the fastest. Which again, I don't want to downplay how important it was at the very beginning of the pandemic to get the money out the door as soon as possible. We were in a crisis situation. OMB was issuing, I think it was 4 memos within 3 months on how to loosen some of the requirements to get that money out the door to recipients, to really make sure that dollars could be repurposed to get to those needs at the beginning of the pandemic. It's just now, a year and a half later, we are focusing on making sure we're getting out the money out the door to the right people. So it's really just rebalancing and encouraging agencies to think through some of the lessons learned. Probably one of the biggest ones from PRAC, actually, that we at OMB have been pushing really hard is being smart about when you're allowing self-attestation. I mean, it's one of Michael Horowitz's big lessons learned that self-attestation doesn't work. You really need to follow up and get kind of the documentation to back that up. And so it's really pushing agencies where we can and where it's reasonable to provide to require recipients to provide documentation and not just allow self-attestation.
Yeah. So does that lead us into the guidance and communication component of issuing specific guidance and then making sure that all the recipients get it and understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, you may want to jump in here from a Treasury perspective as well. One of the things we've been working very hard with agencies on is really thinking through that guidance and trying to maybe take an extra week, or even in some cases 2 or 3 weeks, to get it right the first time or closer to right the first time. Because during the CARES Act, there were many programs that within hours, if not, minutes, things were already being updated and changed because we were at such a pace of trying to get it out, that we didn't do as good of a job as we could have with taking a moment to make sure that it was comprehensive or that we weren't making mistakes with that guidance. And so as part of American Rescue Plan, we've really been asking agencies to take a minute and really think it through. That's not to say that we haven't had to update our guidance. That is always going to be the case. Agencies are continuing to update FAQs, but we are trying much harder now to be more thoughtful and comprehensive and go through that extra 2 or 3 days of review before it goes live, because getting that quality right really helps us in the long run, even if it means an extra couple of days on the back end that people are waiting for it.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing with the guidance is, and as Deirdre was saying, that we had to balance the get the money out quickly with getting it out the right way. And as I said earlier, because of some of the way the Treasury had implemented the operational part of it, there were disconnects between policies. So it was slow to make a decision. And then being slow to make a decision was running up to, you need to get some money out. And those are some of the things we fixed with ARP, especially when with ARP, there were some programs that received additional funding, but there were also still some new programs. And we worked on getting the guidance as best as we could so that recipients would understand what were allowable and non-allowable expenses. So it didn't become a policy question after the money already went out. And I would say even deciding how do you allocate the money. So when you're talking about sending out money, as one of your earlier questions from state and local governments who got money, how do you allocate that out? Or when you're talking about allocation of money to tribal governments, the legislation wasn't necessarily clear on how you do that allocation. It becomes more policy and how you try to do it in a fair and equitable way. We learned some lessons for the subsequent rounds that it's better to wait a little bit, as Deirdre was saying, to make sure that you answered some of those questions first rather than trying to answer them afterwards, because afterwards it's too late. And one of those was, as Bob was mentioning, the payments to dead people. I remember for the first round of economic impact payments, it wasn't specified in the legislation. Do you pay dead people or not? Do you pay people who are incarcerated or not? And how do you determine what congressional intent is? Because usually in the past they've specified it. And so one of the other lessons learned about communication is, as they're forming the policy of communicating with the staff on the Hill who are writing it and saying, these are some of the things you need to be thinking about, so that in subsequent rounds of legislation, they did specify what they wanted in terms of payment. What is the date that triggers whether somebody gets a payment if they've died before a certain date or after a certain date? As an example, that didn't happen in that first round.
And this ties directly to build on Tim's observations. We give Treasury credit. We just issued a report, lessons learned report, which distills down what we believe are the lessons learned from the first round. And it's not just, here are the things that went bad, but it's also those instances where there were course corrections made. We give credit, and so. Classic example is exactly what Tim was just talking about. We contrast, there's one of the lessons learned is there's a need to get out accurate guidance quickly. And we contrast the CARES Act guidance with the subsequent guidance for state and local fiscal recovery fund, which seems to be a much better received. And we also identify, Tim's exactly right on the legislative stuff. And that was self-certification for gig workers for unemployment insurance. That was the big one for us was the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and the essentially a prohibition on SBA from checking tax transcript records, which is a critical element to verify, date of establishment of an entity. They couldn't do it. It's not that they may have wanted to, they may have not wanted to, who knows, but they couldn't do that. They were prohibited by statute. And so we identify those lessons learned in a document for the next go round, so folks know, like, this is the stuff you need to be concerned about.
So did that prohibition also lead to maybe organizations getting PPP loans that weren't qualified or
there are different
didn't deserve them, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, definitely. I mean, there are different program requirements, and they operate very, very differently. One's through banks, one's through SBA, but that element was subsequently fixed, and SBA is now able to verify date of establishment, or tax transcript information. But absolutely, you see, it's that spillover effect. If there's a weakness in controls in one program in an agency, it may very well affect another program.
Interesting. So how is technology helping you all from an analytics perspective or visualization? I always feel like technology is your friend, but is it aiding you in trying to get your work done faster? Are you leveraging new technologies throughout this pandemic to deal with all the extra funding and?
Sure. So while not purely entirely technology, certainly related, is right before the pandemic, OMB and Treasury worked together to create this new tracking capability for financial data that would flow through to USA spending. And because of that work, when we first issued guidance relative to the CARES Act, we were able to provide really specific direction to agencies on how to tag the money they were getting. So that way we could be more transparent, like eons faster than we would have been historically. It was really, we got lucky that it was up and running in time, but it has really been a game changer and has allowed USA spending to almost instantly, as soon as the reporting came up, be able to subset the COVID-19 related spending, which has really helped to make decisions and to be able to explain this is where the money is going and visualize it for folks, especially, for example, during times of transition, when you're going between presidents that you don't have access to all of the information. Having a public source that everyone can point to can be really, really helpful. And in this case, USA Spending was able to do a really good job very quickly to really pinpoint in on the vast majority of the COVID-19 spending. So that technology advancement in the last couple of years really made a huge difference in this crisis. And those are the kinds of things we want to learn and apply to the future for sure.
And tying into that, so there was a lot of communication that went into that even before the law was signed. We were talking with OMB in terms of what the reporting requirements might look like. And then once it was signed, we quickly gathered the cross-agency committee that we have to talk about what are some. We wanted to make sure that from a data act and a submitting data perspective, that it was going to be as less of a burden as possible. It's still going to be some type of burden, but we didn't want it to be overly so. And so we worked with OMB and the agencies, and we pivoted based on what we learned. And then we diverted resources within the Fiscal Service to make changes to the broker, to the guidance, which is called the DAMES. It's the guidance on how agencies submit the data to us. And then we quickly established a sandbox so agencies could start testing. What does that look like? Because they're going to start reporting more information than they ever had before. And then we also thought, well, from a technology perspective, we don't want the broker to break because it's consuming too much data. And so we re-architected the way we consume the data. We re-architected the broker so that we could speed up the process. And then we worked with some agencies like SBA who had to submit way more data than they ever did before on their business loan programs. And we knew that that bandwidth would be an issue. And so we were able to, like, on average, agencies in one quarter had to submit 10 times more data than they did the quarter that year before. And so that requires technology changes. And I've been proud to say that it went without a hitch. So,
yeah, I have to agree, Tim, because I don't think we necessarily get as much credit for that. I think that, sure, there's certainly more work that needs to get done in the transparency space. I will be the first to admit that we can have better recipient reporting. Bob, I know that you're there and I know the PRAC is there, but we really were able to pivot in a way that, like, the federal government doesn't pivot. We went from quarterly to monthly reporting on COVID, and agencies, like Tim mentioned, were tenfold increasing their reporting requirements during a pandemic when everyone was remote, which was like a monster feat that I think had gotten lost in some of the broader, like, should we have improved reporting on some specific data elements? That is certainly a conversation we can and should have, but I don't think that lessens the, like, huge feat that agencies were able to overcome, especially at those very early days of the pandemic.
I had heard actually that, from the Data Act, it used to be quarterly reporting, and that some agencies were now doing monthly. I don't know if it's even more frequent than that, but monthly reporting, which I remember when they complained about quarterly reporting at the beginning. It's like, what? Oh my goodness, quarterly.
So one of the things we actually did with the CARES Act was require all COVID funding to be reported monthly. And now, because agencies have had such opportunity to implement that monthly, we are moving to everybody reporting monthly. So during the pandemic, we increased their reporting requirements to many agencies' detriment, they would argue, but we thought it was really important for transparency purposes.
Then also added disbursement data on top of the obligation data that they had always been reporting.
That's right.
But Ann, I'd like to, when you talk about technology, another thing that we did, and this is leveraging all the data that we have at our disposal for account validation, is that we have a lot of information on people that we pay or people that we receive money from because of the nature of how we do payments and collections on behalf of the federal government. And you would think that with IRS being part of Treasury that they would take advantage of that, but it's not as easy as that. And we wanted to make sure that, so in terms of our goal to eliminate paper checks and distribute as many payments electronically as possible, one of the biggest producers of checks through tax returns is the IRS, because people sometimes want that check. So part of it is communicating to recipients that electronic payments are actually safer and more secure and faster than checks. But with the account validation tools that we have, we went through our records. So the IRS, we entered a data sharing agreement. They have a lot of restrictions on the amount of data that they're able to share with agencies by law. So, but we entered into a data sharing agreement. They gave us information on, these are the EIP, the economic impact payments that we would be making by check, which they made by check in the first round of EIP1, that to see if we had information on those recipients who received a check. And we were able to provide the IRS with 42 million matches where we said, wow, you have an address, we have a bank account. And they were able to use 32 million of them in the subsequent rounds, so that more payments by the time we got to EIP3 were made electronically. And we also worked with the Social Security Administration, because surprisingly, there's a number of Social Security recipients who receive their benefits electronically, but they get a paper check from the IRS. So they got their payments for economic impact payment, a number of them by check instead. So compare and contrast. So we did data matching with the Social Security Administration as well. So in EIP1, of all the Social Security recipients, 70% received them electronically. By EIP3, it was 96%. Now, this was using technology that we have at our disposal to be able to make payments faster. And it also, we estimate that by doing this, we converted over 48 million payments that would have gone out by check to direct deposit, so that the people had access to the funds much faster than they have. Because you think about it, by producing a paper check, we have to write the checks, we have to insert them in envelopes, we have to present them to the Postal Service, who then has to mail them around the country. And then somebody has to present that instrument to convert it into money. So whether that's going into a bank or whether that's doing a mobile deposit, it still takes time rather than getting it. And so now that we have the child tax credits that we are paying on a monthly basis, that majority are going into the bank account on a certain day. So that to me is just the dramatic example of how the government can use technology and information that we already have at our disposal to improve the way we do things.
And
so while we're, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was going to just a couple of points, if I can, on technology. We were born in the pandemic, March 27th, so under stay-at-home orders. So technology is how we've built in the organization with people around the country. One of the, and we've used technology solutions to solve large and small problems. On the small side, we've got hearing authorities, one of the things in the CARES Act, and we said, oh, well, how can we use that authority during the pandemic? So technology like this, with video technology, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or whatever, we've been able to do a series of panels where we bring together which we probably couldn't do in the real world. We can bring together experts from all over the country that are willing to sit on a panel for an hour and provide valuable data points. And one of the things that I know is of interest to the administration and also to the IG community is equitable distribution of relief. And so we're shining a light on that. We've got an event coming up co-sponsored with NAPA on October 5th, looking at the rental assistance program with a dynamite panel. I would encourage, I have a link that should be in the chat room, so folks can sign up for our distribution list so you can register for the event. That's on the small side. On the big side, we're very proud of our advancements in using technology to help audits and investigations. And we created the Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence, and I think conceptually people can think about it. It sort of sits somewhere between Do Not Pay and the Treasury Payment Integrity Center of Excellence on one side, and then on the other side there's the Department of Justice. It's called a fusion center. It's for live ongoing criminal investigations. Well, there's a huge area between an ongoing federal criminal investigation and a payment integrity issue, and that's the place that the Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence sits. One of the things we're doing, it's a lot like the ROC that people will remember from the recovery days, but one of the things that's very different is we're actually doing engagements with individual offices. So for the Treasury OIG, we built a risk model for the Coronavirus Relief Fund. They have monitoring responsibilities for that $150 billion program. We built a risk model for them to target their audit work. We're working on a robotic process automation project for them, which is going to cut out work hours on individual audits. We also built a risk model for SBA. SBA OIG went from, they had like 700 hotlines the year before the pandemic to 150,000 during the pandemic. There's no way you can hire enough staff to process those hotlines. You need to use technology. So we built a risk model that ingests and process all those hotlines. Those are the types of engagements that we're working on through the PACE.
Interesting. So I have a couple of questions. Or Tim, did you want to jump in?
I just want to say, follow up what Bob was saying about the SBA. That's an example where we were able to use our data to help the IG there. So they gave us 5.2 million PPP loans that they had identified, and that was more than $500 billion. And we put those through our system, and we found that approximately 1% of them we could flag as these look suspicious, that potentially they went to ineligible recipients. And then we dug further into that and discovered that out of a total of about 3,400 total loan servicing locations, that there were 10 that had a majority of these suspicious loans. And that so that I'm telling this is, it's like another tool that then the IG was, so rather than looking at 5.2 million, they were looking at 10 locations that were potentially doing fraudulent loan activity, and we're able to better target their resources because they also have limited resources to do all these investigations.
I get back. Go ahead.
And while these are specific examples, this is exactly the kind of work we want to make sure we are cementing now during the pandemic, but are really making lasting moving forward. Like making sure, for example, that as agencies are starting to explore their data, they're reaching out to Treasury, they're reaching out to the PACE and other data analytics places to really kind of leverage the resources they have available to them. As Tim mentioned at the top, many of these services are free and agencies just don't know enough to go and find them. So at ONB, we are doing our best to let people know, and Treasury is working hard too, to just get the word out that these services are available.
And I hate to monopolize, but I do have one example of that, and that is FEMA, who looked to us for advice. That they were implementing the COVID-19 funeral assistance program, and they wanted to make sure that they were including that they wanted to prevent improper payments because they knew that it was ripe for that. So they turned to us to say we need help with death validation and account validation because we need to verify that someone died when they said they died, that we know why they died, and that this account, the funds are being distributed to an account that they own as opposed to somebody else, a bad actor, let's say. And they determined that by working with us, they were able to prevent $70 million in what would have gone out the door as improper payments because they caught in advance, because they used the services, because they approached us and used this for their program.
No, that's incredible. It's, I wish the general public could hear this, to hear about good government initiatives. I really do. I mean, you all are doing incredible work. So we do have a question here. It said, what percent, an obviously rough estimate, of pandemic payments are estimated to have been in error? Do you guys have a ballpark?
I'm going to
And
say
this is
too
number
many.
payments, not total dollars, but
All
I
right.
guess if you have a dollar amount, that would be interesting too.
I'm going to say too many. And unfortunately, we do not yet know. To be honest, I've heard it described as we've only caught the dumb actors at this point. We haven't really caught the most sophisticated ones yet. So we really just don't know. That's in terms of the malicious actors. And we certainly also don't know yet for all of the programs that are standing up right now and are starting to disperse what that error rate is. With that, there is something that I need to mention before I forget as well. The president in May tasked the White House ARP team along with ONB to really think through and identify recommendations and solutions for preventing the use of stolen identities to accessing public benefits. And that came out of the relationship with the PRAC and those gold standard meetings that we were talking about, where we just kept hearing time and time again about the use of stolen identities. And Gene Sperling, who is the White House ARP coordinator, I will never forget the day where we got off a phone call and he said, if I don't do something to fix this problem, I shouldn't have my job. And it was from that day that he's become laser focused at bringing a whole of government approach to fixing this problem. And so we do not know the extent, but we are on it and we are working very hard right now actively to come up with some concrete recommendations to do a better job addressing it. But Tim, Bob, you may have better estimates.
I don't, but I have a little more context that explain the problem. So a couple of big programs that people think about and you see in the news is the unemployment insurance program. And the IG for Department of Labor has talked about what has been the past improper payment rate, of which fraud is a part of it. And it's been over 10% or around 10% for 14 of the last 17 years, which would bring it to about, I think the quoted figure often is $87 billion in that program. But we don't know. That's what the newspapers would say. We don't know what percentage of the improper payments is fraud. We suspect that it's probably high based upon what we're seeing, but it's impossible. What makes it impossible to determine is the Department of Labor actually didn't do the improper payment assessment for that program because it was viewed as sort of a one-time program, the big bump in funding. The PPP program, the SBA's Paycheck Protection Program, hasn't been assessed by management either. I think the assessment's supposed to be completed this quarter coming up, where we'll start seeing some data that then the IG will audit to determine whether the methodology is sound and all that, and we'll get some sense of improper payment in that massive program.
Well, do we still have a challenge though with the definition of improper payment? Is it necessary? I mean, Tim, we've had this discussion for years, right? An improper payment could be the right amount of money went to you, but I don't have all the right documentation to back that up, or I'm missing some data fields, or I paid $100, I should have paid $90. So it's not really, is it a $100 improper payment or is it a $10 improper payment?
Agreed.
So
And
do we still have that issue in counting?
Yes, there is definitely still the definitional issue, but I will say that this administration and ONB right now is focused on the monetary loss aspect, and in particular, the stolen identities and the use by actors that are much more coordinated and organized rather than the individual who may have, received one additional unemployment check after they started working. That is not our focus. Right now, our laser focus is on finding these organized criminal syndicates and stopping that and figuring out ways to address that part of the improper payment problem. Because while we do have the definitional issue, that is not right now one of our primary focuses as much as on the monetary loss, and in particular, the organized criminal syndicates, because I think we know that there will be another event. We don't know what that event will be. And it is incumbent upon all of us to do what we can now to prevent what we saw happen during this pandemic. And so that is what we are trying to learn from.
So we also have a question, because you all are talking about a lot of progress and accelerating the amount of payments that are going out. There's a question about how large are each of your organizations and how many FTEs do you have devoted to payment integrity? I don't know whether you can answer that question, but
we're tiny at ONB. My team in its entirety is fewer than 25 FTE, but we are mighty. While small, we are a mighty team, I would say. No, all that aside, at ONB at least, we are setting policy. So we don't need, scores of people. What we need are the best and the brightest. And I would argue that that's what we attract at ONB, to really help set the policy and the direction. And then we rely on our partners like the PRAC and the agencies and teams like Tim's that are like actually doing the hard work and working with the agencies. So at OMB, we're really small.
Yeah, and when we talk about dedicated to payment integrity, I'm really talking fraud and accountability and oversight. So we're about 30 FTEs now. We continue to grow. In addition, we have, I think it's 14 data science fellows that we hired who created a data science fellows program of new and recent graduates that we fund and place at the OIGs to promote data literacy. That's been an excellent program for us with good results already. And then we have a PRAC fraud task force focusing on those cases that Deidre was talking about. So we're actually using our authority and leveraging agents from around the OIG community that wouldn't necessarily have independent authority to work PPP fraud or unemployment insurance fraud. We're able to bring them into the task force and share the resources there. So we've got about 30 agents now that are working collective task force fraud cases. So it's a pretty decent staff at the moment, but doesn't compare to Tim's, I'm sure. So.
And I'm the one that should be able to answer this question, but I can't. I can tell you, I have 3,600 employees. How many specifically work in payment integrity? I don't know. And but I do know that it's also supplemented by, we do payment integrity and fraud detection in some of our programs are operated for us by financial institutions and some by the Federal Reserve, and they also do that. So for instance, tax collection system is operated by a commercial bank with our oversight. They do fraud detection. I can get back to you, Ann, and you can look at it, but I couldn't even begin to guess, and I should know the answer to that question in full disclosure.
No, I would also say most agencies have dedicated staff as well. So government-wide, there is some real heft there. Most agencies have some dedicated resources.
So I will admit to having gone to USA Spending recently and also the PRAC oversight.gov, and the number of, first of all, for folks, if you haven't been there, I mean, you can drill down on states, you can see what states are getting more money than others. And I'm one of those visual people that like that kind of depiction that then you can drill down and don't give me just a whole bunch of columns and numbers. But the other part is the number of reports, and Bob, I went on there, 583 reports and investigations, or reports from investigations listed, which, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, you all stood up during the middle of a pandemic, all virtual, I would suspect. And it's amazing the amount of work that's continued to be done and then, documented and reported. So, I mean, bad actors are being identified, and
yeah, and none of that could happen on the criminal side without the partnership of the Department of Justice, and this, like you said, this is happening during a time where large sections of our country are under stay-at-home orders, so there are restrictions on processing arrestees or detainees through the criminal justice system, all sorts of changes in court rules to deal with social distancing. So it is remarkable the number of criminal outcomes to date. But we're equally proud on the audit side. There's 250 plus audit reports, pandemic-related audit reports. And one of the things we've been pushing was one of the first things we did was this concept of agile oversight, to say we need to look at our work differently, right? We can't take a year to do an audit and report it out. Our work has to be bulletproof because it's public, but we need to get product out quicker. So we adopted this agile oversight methodology and approach. And that's used in some of these instances to get 250 reports out. Also on our website, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I think there's about 150 state and local reports as well.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous insights at the state and local oversight level that we are trying to, we have a number of initiatives underway working with that community because we think they're tremendous partners and can help us in this massive task.
So you have intergovernmental discussions as well. So you've got points of contact at states and large recipients.
Absolutely, we have a initiative called Listing Posts where there's somebody assigned from the Department of Education OIG that coordinates these, but we've got regular listening posts with state and local folks where we identify issues of concern and work with them. And we've got a couple of projects underway where we're digging down into state level program implementation.
And that reminds me that I should definitely give a shout out to GAO, who has been a real partner to ONB as well as part of this process. So ONB, the White House ARP team, and GAO are meeting often to just check in and make sure we are all aligned. And in particular, on the identity theft work that we've been working on, GAO has been critical in getting us access to state auditors as well as state CIOs to really help think through some of the problems that we're seeing at the state and local level. So while not with us on the screen today, GAO has certainly been a really important partner throughout this process as well.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. And we, for the first time in my awareness, we have a combined report monthly where we have all open OIG and all open GAO reports combined. So all of our combined federal oversight community can see what's being worked, right, to deconflict and coordinate our activities. And that's a big undertaking.
You know, as we talk about working remotely, Tim, you were mentioning and discussing paper checks. Now that requires people to be somewhere in person where those checks are being printed and envelopes are and stuffing envelopes. So they're obviously not everybody is working remotely. You've got people in the office at Treasury.
Yes, that's correct. And that's why especially during the height of the pandemic and always, my first priority is the health and safety of employees. So I had to make sure we have 2 locations where we produce checks, Philadelphia and Kansas City, and they had to come in, and we had to make sure that we were providing a safe work environment for them. And I'm just fortunate. I think we're fortunate that they appreciated what they were doing. They understood the importance of what they were doing. They also knew that we were concerned about their health and safety. And we had people working double shifts. We had them working weekends because we were trying to get those checks produced and in the mail as quickly as possible. And we didn't have the absenteeism that I would have expected. But it's also because we communicated with them, explained the importance of what they were doing, thanked them for what they were doing, but that they're to this day still coming in. We still have to protect those work sites because they can't do the work anywhere else. It has to be on site.
Right. So we have a question here. It says, do you expect that the Attorney General will prosecute folks that you identify as obtaining funds illegally?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure. Different than the 500 that we have,
right.
We've got strong commitment from the Department of Justice. So the justice part of it is, so we have a task force which combines and coordinates the resources within the OIG community. The Department of Justice determined in about, I think, March or April, that there needed to be additional efforts at the DOJ level. So they created a Department of Justice Fraud Task Force, which brings together not only Department of Justice prosecutors, both in DC and outside, but also the entire federal law enforcement community. So there's the commitment at the highest level to bring folks to justice. But as we've seen, and if you were to analyze fraud complaint data with the PPP program, you've got a tremendous amount of what I call low-grade fraud. These are like high volume, under $20,000 fraud cases. Those are a particular challenge for the federal law enforcement system because it's hard to get prosecution on a $20,000 fraud case. And the prosecutors, the system's getting clogged up, so they're looking for the $3 million loss
Big dollar
Lamborghini case, right? And that's what they're looking for, conspicuous consumption. You just can't arrest you. There's not enough cops and prosecutors to deal with the low-grade fraud, and that's something that's of a deep interest to us. We don't have the answers to it yet, but we're certainly thinking it through.
So does that mean at some point in time that, I mean, people will just get away with it?
No, that's one of the things that, that's one of the things that we're looking at using all our tools, and Michael Horowitz is committed to using not only the criminal justice system, but civil fraud enforcement and administrative remedies. So we've got a pilot program now with the Interagency Suspension and Debarment Committee. So one of the things is, why can't we help move the community along to say, at the very least on this low grade fraud, these people should be debarred from getting future federal funds, right? As a control. And then Tim's folks would have, the system in place that would ensure that that happens when it's checked the next go round. So those are the things that we're working on. We're working a pilot right now to see how we can increase throughput and a number of referrals on those, because you still have a lot of suspension and debarment referrals we're going to be passing forward. So.
Well, and that's also why we have been piloting these account validation tools. So you say, I'm Ann Eberts and this is my bank account. And prior to this, we would just accept that to be the truth because we had no way of knowing, but we've partnered with the financial sector and we can now go in and with some confidence say, yes, and this is your account. One, we can look across our data sources and say, we've paid you at this account before, you get a benefit there already. Or if you're trying to change an account, we can look and say, you're trying to change this account to another one. Is that account associated with you? Mm-hmm. And so that we can try to prevent that type of fraud. And then we've put together tools. We've been working with the IRS when people try to divert payments, either let's say a check from one address to another, especially in times of disaster. This happens a lot. So we work with FEMA on that. So FEMA, IRS, two agencies are targeted for these kinds of activities. We've been working on being able to use our tools to try to prevent fraud and stop it, at least flag it as suspicious so they can follow up and tell us whether or not they think that that's valid or not. And you would think in a tax collection system, why would somebody submit a fraudulent tax submission to the IRS? Well, it turns out because sometimes someone say, I'm paying a quarterly corporate tax, and then I'm going to go back in and say, oh, I'm going to file like that was improper. I didn't mean to do that. Refund it back to this account. Well, these are kinds of things we're looking for. So those are the kind of tools that we can incorporate to try to prevent this low-grade fraud automatically by flagging them for the agency rather than trying to collect it after the fact, because same experience. It's tough. When I was at SBA, if you discovered something and it was low dollar value, it was hard to try to prosecute that.
So are you all sharing data with states?
Well, now that you say that, that was going to be I was thinking as I kept talking about our tools that we use for federal agencies are the same tools that we can support the state and local governments. In fact, we have outreach to state and local, and part of it is getting that message out there. But we've worked with like as an example, Oregon. We have done work for Oregon. We've been working with the state of New York, and so these same payment integrity tools. So especially when you talk about a federal benefit that flows down to the state and local government, those are ripe candidates for the kind of data that we have.
And so while we've definitely made some strides there is more work we can and should be doing and we'll be working towards. I will say in a world of limited resources, we have right now been focused on what we can do in our own house within the federal government. Sure. But it is of primary importance to make sure that we are not losing track once it goes to our state partners, because in so many programs, in so many cases, they're the ones that are actually interacting with those end recipients. And so at a minimum, we should be sharing our lessons learned with them so they can apply them.
Right, go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
The one thing, just to give credit to the White House ARP team, where they're absolutely instrumental in helping Department of Labor work through some very thorny, complicated issues regarding unemployment insurance data that is owned by the states, and to encourage the states to share across boundaries at the state level, but then also share it back up to the federal government and back down. So new guidance was just issued in the last couple of months that now that we're starting to see the data flow, and I'm told it'll be in the next month or so that the spigot will be open and we'll see that state data flowing back up, which then the OIG will share with their state partners back down.
Yeah, I was going to ask you all about guidance and communication, because I know there are some recipients at the local level that may never have received federal funding before. So understanding the requirements for reporting the use, what data fields are required, where do I send information, how do I manage this? So I guess my question to the three of you is, what methods of communication are you using to get to people that you don't normally communicate directly with, that are now new recipients, theoretically, of money that, federal dollars that they haven't gotten before?
So one of the big programs where that is true is the new Treasury State and Local program. We have these non-entitlement units, which are these smaller governments, many of which who have never received federal funds before. And so the White House ARP team is very actively out there on the circuit, holding meetings with mayors and smaller local governments to make sure that they are aware of what is available. Treasury's website is a great place for folks to go to see what's out there publicly. Treasury has a very active, and I understand busy inbox where they are receiving questions all of the time. So a lot of it is just trying to make the right folks available to get the questions answered, but it is a hard task, especially with some of these really small localities that have really never interacted with the federal government before. So similar to like getting the balance right of getting the money out the door quickly, it's also getting the balance right with what we're asking of those very, very small recipients.
Sure.
Like some of these tribes that are very small and do not, for example, have access to websites or other things where we might want to be saying that the burden should be less, but it's actually quite difficult for them to submit things online. So it's really meeting people where they're at, and we're working through those issues, but there's more work to be done.
And I do think in some ways we are kind of in a bubble, especially around the Washington Beltway. Is, we're familiar with the organizations, we know how to find the websites, and we look at them and we analyze them. A lot of to others beyond the Beltway, sometimes it's where do I look first,
So, and to following up on what Deirdre was talking about, that we thought about this in advance, especially because sending out a benefit disbursement to 50 states is a lot different than when you add thousands of these smaller localities, and knowing that it's going to be hard to get the message out. So when you try to write clear guidance, that's one thing. But in government speak, those forms can always be confusing. And so one of the things that we did for the expansion of the state and local under the ARP program is we created the application portal to be more service oriented, self-service oriented, that we worked on making improvements from the way that the state governments would submit applications under the CARES Act, under that state program, and allowed them to be able to make their own modifications and changes based on if they submitted an application that there was something that was an error. We also, in the ARP program, as part of the shared services that we provide in the fiscal service, is we provided that help desk support and took it off of the department who did it in the beginning. And trying to do a help desk support under the CARES Act was just trying to call someone's desk number, but it wasn't really set up like a help desk. Well, that's something that we do. We have call centers. And so we provided that first line of call center support and only escalated to the department those things that were more policy of nature, but not about program aspects or how to do an application. And so that's some of what we try to do to make it easier for recipients to apply for these funds, to be able to answer their questions through either email or through phone, and then make it more self-sufficient so that it's clearer to understand than than it normally is.
And similarly, in addition to state and local entities, we also saw brand new entities to the federal government sphere, like restaurants or shuttered venues. So like the theater industry, entities that have never applied before. And so some of the advancements, and back to your technology question earlier, applying via app on a phone, which would have never been heard of prior to the pandemic. Just really big advancements in trying to meet people where they're at. Equity has really been a very important focus of this administration, and making sure that we are giving recipients the time they need to apply to these programs. So another thing that agencies have tried to do where the law allowed is have carve out periods at the beginning, especially for these first come, first serve programs where it's really the most sophisticated actors or the most likely to hit your system first. Carve out some time at the beginning of the application period for those less sophisticated recipients to make sure that they have the opportunity to access the funds and they're not precluded merely because they haven't applied millions of times before for federal funds. So those are the kinds of things we have been doing in a very real and active way live during this pandemic, as we've learned what our recipients, how they are different now than they have been before.
So I have an interesting question. Is there a way to sign up for alerts or get updated if OMB and PRAC come out with another joint memo or other guidance? So how does somebody get on your email list?
So there should be the link in the chat room to our distribution list. And so we will always put out, if we do another joint alert, it will be distributed that way, but you're going to get much more. So for example, the NAPA panel that we have coming up, you're going to see registration information for that. So, and you alternatively can go to our website, pandemicoversight.gov, and you can scroll down at the bottom, sign up and click it, put in your email address, and there you go.
Similarly, CFO.gov is a great place. Another shameless plug on CFO.gov, we have recently issued a series of payment integrity training sessions for agencies, but it would be of interest to everyone. It's really how you implement the Payment Information Integrity Act. We issued guidance in March for how agencies can do that, and followed up with a series, I think it's of 7 different trainings that are available at CFO.gov. So please do check that out as well.
I know we're getting close to the end of time, but there's a question about what are the efforts of reviewing the relief of loans paid? Specifically, what percentage of the funds paid must be repaid?
Some of that's program specific. So PPP in the legislation had some requirements about what was forgivable or not. And so the agencies are working on that very actively right now. I know that it will also be a subject of interest to the IGs and the audit community at large to make sure that agencies are getting that right. But I don't have a ton of background right now at this point.
And
I don't either. Except the stats, you can see the raw numbers on it. SBA posts that now on their website. You can see the number of loans forgiven and the dollar amounts forgiven.
So I would expect that you all have to brief the Hill frequently. Anybody want to talk about that? We have a couple more minutes.
Sure. Yeah, we do brief a lot.
So how frequently are you called to the Hill, or is it?
Regularly, and they're interested in, rightfully so, with how we're building the Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence. We got an additional sum of money in January for that, and they want to make sure that we're being good stewards of that. They want to make sure that we're not duplicating what the IGs have. They want to make sure we're not duplicating what Tim and his group has or what the Department of Justice has. So we're trying to make sure we're in the right space. They also want to know how we're interacting with OMB and how we're together making strides in data transparency. We get asked a lot about how we're interacting with state and locals, and that the issue of clear guidance and to the extent that we can help promote that. Those are some of the main issues that we get asked about.
In addition to those issues, we are also often asked about spend down rates and are we seeing these dollars go out the door at the patterns we would expect? Another one of the differences with ARP versus the CARES Act is some of that funding intentionally has a longer tail. So we would expect a slower spend down rate. So just kind of having those conversations about what is and should be expected in terms of the money going out the door, and also just generally checking in on what are the lessons we've learned for future legislation, and are there things from the way these new programs were created that we should be including in future legislation or other new programs that may be created as part of forthcoming legislation.
That makes sense. Bob, there is a couple of questions. Somebody want to know if you're hiring at the PRAC.
We are always hiring and looking for bright minds. So we've got a couple of announcements on our website. We also we've got, I call it the hiring superpower. So we have detail opportunities or authority to do reimbursable and non-reimbursable details. So we've got some folks on staff for that, but all skill sets. We need people that know technology, know oversight. We find that OMB is a great mystery to a lot of folks, so we've hired some people that have that background. It's always good to know thy enemy, right? So I'm just kidding. So it's great to know the background and context, and it's actually helped us work much more productively because there's no translation issues, right, with us. But yeah, we're hiring. So prac_jobs at sigi.gov. You can send your resumes, and we'll take a look. We do get a high volume of resumes, so if we don't get back to you right away, please understand.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to give each one of you a minute. So what do you from the seat that you're in, what do you want to make sure that people understand from your agency or from your particular part of government?
So I'm going to go first, so you guys can't be so clever that I've got nothing that I can say on my end. I just want to thank everyone who's out there listening today and tell you we are working hard and we are working together, and payment integrity really is a top priority, not just for ONB, but for the administration. For those of you who were around during the Recovery Act, then Vice President Biden was tasked with overseeing the Recovery Act, and he got the nickname Sheriff Joe. And when he showed up in town, it was very obvious to us at OMB why. And he had a very similar tasking for us, that it was important that not just the money went out the door, but it went out to the door to the right recipients, because that ensures that the people who are eligible can get access to those funds. And so we are on it, and we are working together in ways that a lot of people don't necessarily always give the federal government credit for, but we really are working together and doing the best we can, especially during this pandemic, which has introduced a number of new challenges that we too are overcoming together with our agency partners and with the private sector and all of our recipients.
Great, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to actually put a shameless plug in. So,
okay, good.
Okay, so tomorrow at 1:30 in W109, you can learn more about these payment integrity tools that I've been talking about. They're going to talk about the account validation service that we have, as well as the debt validation services and other tools and the data analytics that we provide, because we provide the tools, but you have to be able to use them. And so getting the message out and learning how to use them. And one of the things I said in the beginning is one of my challenges is not just stopping a payment after it's going to go out the door, but as you're going through the approval process. And that's going to require some thought, and that's going to require some planning. And we're trying to work on the tools that you need, the APIs to be able to use these. It's a matter of looking at your operations and as you're making these decisions about how to make payments to individuals. Anyway, so that's a plug for the tools. We provide them for a reason. We want them to be used, and so that we don't have to talk about improper payments continually because we're stopping them before they happen.
Okay, so W109.
That's my utopia. W109 tomorrow.
Got it. Okay, Bob?
So I would say every dollar lost to fraud is a dollar that's not available to other programs that need it. And we're talking about $5 trillion. There's no organization, PRAC or otherwise, that can do this alone. We need partnerships at all levels, state and local oversight folks, professional organizations like AGA, partnership with OMB, with the agencies, law enforcement partners. We need really, it's our tax dollars, right? So one of the reasons that we maintain the website is so folks can look there and find out if there's something people are closest in their community. They know what's going on. They see how money's being used, and we're dependent on folks to look at the data, be fluent in the data, and feel comfortable reporting back to us. Know that their allegations or complaints will be safeguarded, and we'll take appropriate action on it. So that's what I would say. Is please visit our website, pandemicoversight.gov. Another shameless plug. Got to end on that.
That's fine. That's perfect. I want shameless plugs from all of you. I think that's great. First of all, thank you all so very much. We can all know how busy you must be, and just the breadth of work and efforts that you have ongoing and the responsibilities that you have is huge. So I wanted to say thank you so very much for speaking with us today.